Arts, the String Theory Charter School. My name is Emily Walkowitz, and I am the proud principal here, so thank you for coming out. I'm honored to serve. This is my 5th year in this building. I've been an administrator in the city of Philadelphia for about 15 years, and I come from New York prior to that. We're pleased to host the 3rd Congressional Candidates Forum tonight, and welcome all of you, our candidates, community members, and guests. So thank you for being here. At Philadelphia Performing Arts, we believe strongly in engaging thoughtful political discourse. As a school, we're not just educating students academically, we're building tomorrow's citizens. Our goal is always to expose students to ideas, leadership, opportunities that help them envision their success and potential. In that spirit, I'd like to share that we're hosting a career day on April 15th, yes. If any of our guests or candidates are interested in participating, we would love to have you come back. It is tax day. We'd like to add you to our diverse panel of professionals who will speak to students about their journeys and career paths in the spirit of exposing them to multiple options in which we can serve our life as. Thank you for being here tonight, contributing to the meaningful conversation for our community and the young people that represent our future. I will now introduce Drew Murray, Chairman of the Philadelphia Crosstown Coalition.
Thank you. Well, first, I want to thank String Theory School. This is the second event that they've done for us. It's an incredible venue, and they do it all for free. So thank you for that. I want to thank all the candidates for coming. I know you're probably exhausted. I know you just finished petition season. I know how hard that is. So yes, I'm the chairman of the Philadelphia Crosstown Coalition. If you don't know what that is, it's a coalition of RCOs all over the city of Philadelphia, from South Philly, Southwest Philly, to Northeast Philly, to Northwest, and Center City. And we have about 40 member organizations. We have 5 candidates here tonight. I believe 8 candidates did file petitions. So if you're wondering why you're not seeing 8, we set a fundraising minimum of $200,000 for Cycle 7, which is what we put in at the end of the year. It's called the annual report. If you're a local American like I am. So if you did not meet that requirement, we did not invite you to attend. So that is why there are 3 candidates who did file. We were not here tonight. So we're going to have a 90-second Q&A. Well, not each candidate will have 90 seconds to introduce themselves. Then there'll be a 90-second question period. And then there'll be a yes/no lightning round. And then at the end, the candidates will have 60 seconds to closing remarks. So I know you're not here to listen to me, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you everyone for coming, and I'm going to turn it over to NBC 10's Lauren May.
Hello everyone. Can you hear me? Is this working? Did I turn it off?
Turn it off.
1, 2, 3. All right. Good evening, everyone. And thanks, Drew. My name is Lauren May. For those of you who don't know me, I cover politics for NBC 10. I host our At Issue show on Sundays, and also have a political podcast called Battleground Politics. You can look out for those things. So you are not here to hear from me, though. You're here to hear from these candidates. So we're going to get right to it. First of all, just to give you a little bit of background, we are talking about the 3rd district, that is the congressional seat that they are running for, includes Northwest and West Philadelphia, along with parts of North Philadelphia and South Philadelphia. It is currently represented by Congressman Dwight Evans, a Democrat who is not running for re-election. Now, Pennsylvania has 17 members of the House of Representatives. If elected, one of you would become one of them. So we are going to start with Senator Street, with you, with introductions.
Good evening. It is good to be here with you all today. It's good to see all my fellow kids. We haven't done this since yesterday. But it is, I think the exercise of us talking to the public is critically important. I'm a member of the Pennsylvania Senate. I'm a husband of April. There's April's name there. Father, thank you. Father of 5 children. Grandfather of 6, between the ages of 2 and 6 years old. When you have children and grandchildren, particularly grandchildren, it makes you think about the world differently. That has informed and instructed a big part of how I've approached my career so far and my work as a senator. When we think about housing and there'll be a lot of people talking about affordable housing. I've done the work to secure resources for affordable housing, because when I live in a neighborhood in North Philadelphia, at 16th and Lehigh, where people are struggling for housing every day, and they need results. So I've secured millions of dollars of affordable housing and and helped the Sharswood development get built. When you talk about healthcare, and there will be a lot of people talking about healthcare throughout this country and in this debate, I introduced the legislation that created the Pennsylvania Healthcare Exchange. And all those talk about the Obamacare tax credits expiring. Well, the legislation in Pennsylvania that allowed us to implement them and use them was pending. And that was my legislation. I want to go to Congress to make sure we can get that restored. When there are people in my community that die.
Senator Street, we're gonna have to.
I'm done?
Yeah, that's our 90 seconds.
All right. Well, looking forward to talking.
There'll be much more time. Dr. Sear.
Good evening, and thank you to the Philadelphia Crosstown Coalition, because making sure community voices shape who stays, who builds wealth, who has power is not just good policy, it's democracy in action. My name is Dr. Ayla Stanford. I was born at Broad Nolley, grew up at 18th and Erie, SNAP benefit kid, Section 8 housing, was able to go to college from a scholarship from Congressman Shaka Fattah because I was poor enough and smart enough. I'm a physician and surgeon. I built a practice here. I teach at Penn. And when COVID vaccination contract failed the communities it was supposed to serve, Democratic leadership called me to fix it. We built something from the ground up. We reached over 100,000 Philadelphians who would have been left behind. And that's what I do. I show up, I fix things, and I make sure those who are most at risk are taken care of. Washington is in chaos because of Donald Trump and his MAGA agenda. Housing investment, healthcare, community development funding, all under assault. And this week, 314 Action Fund, a national coalition founded right here in Philadelphia by a woman, is supporting my efforts to change healthcare, improve people's lives, and represent you in DC for the 3rd Congressional District. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dave Oxman, and it's a real pleasure to be here. So I'm a native Philadelphian. My family goes back 4 generations on both sides. I live in South Philadelphia with my wife and my 2 kids. I'm a proud Philadelphia School District parent. For the last 20 years, I've worked as an intensive care physician at Jefferson University Hospital. And in that job as an intensive care doctor, I've had the incredible privilege of taking care of Philadelphians from every corner of this city and from every walk of life on some of their most desperate days. And I have to tell you that that work is an incredible privilege, but it also exposes you to so many of the challenges that Philadelphians face. And while in my job, health is all about not being sick, when you leave the hospital, you realize that health is about so much more. Because you can't be healthy if your job doesn't pay you a living wage. Your kids can't be healthy if they go to a school that's overcrowded and underfunded. And you sure as heck can't be healthy if you've been kicked off your health insurance or you're not able to afford your medications. So in my way of thinking, a congressperson's... I didn't even have to do that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, let me just finish that line.
Go ahead.
The priority of anyone who serves in Congress should be nothing less to fight for the health of every person of their congressional district.
Did it not load?
I was flying blind.
I appreciate that. Is it gonna load? Yeah. We have somebody who might be able to just, old
All
school
right.
it.
Oh,
Oh, there we
okay.
go.
Hi, Chris Rabb here, State Representative. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm gonna zigzag. When I think about this organization, this coalition of registered community organizations, I think of my grandmother who inspired me to run for office. She was a community organizer in Baltimore in a black working class neighborhood, and the city wanted to put an incinerator in her black neighborhood while they were going to create a new swimming pool, public swimming pool, that was not accessible to black people in a white neighborhood next to them. That's how she started organizing. She said, we're not going to allow this to happen, and she stood up. Then she started to run for office, and she had to fight the political machine, which in Baltimore was all Democrats. And she fought, and she fought, and she fought. She lost every race she ran in. The last race, when I was a little boy working with her on the ground, they found someone with the same last name to confuse voters because they're afraid that she was actually going to get on city council. I'm running to fight establishment politics, to do the work of the people so that we can have greater affordability. We can fight fascism, and we can tax the rich to pay for all the radical things I will talk about later.
And we're loaded. So I am State Representative Morgan Cephas, and first and foremost, I just want to thank the Crosstown Coalition for having today's conversation and just really being a representation of so many civic associations across our city, because we ultimately all want the same things. We want safer streets, we want affordable housing, we want access to quality and affordable healthcare. We want access to job opportunities that we can actually see and touch. We want a mass transit system that actually runs and moves us throughout the entire city of Philadelphia. And these are the reasons why I ran for office in the first place in 2016. I was one of those candidates that had to take on the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party wasn't working for us in the city of Philadelphia, and they sure were not working for us in Harrisburg. So as a direct result, once I got elected, I got to work. I was a team of Democrats that actually flipped the House of Representatives. We didn't have it in close to 10 to 15 years. We were able to take it back in 5. And as a direct result, we've been able to deliver on so many issues that you all care about. But I know, when I think of my mother back in 1986, fighting the same fights while she was on that picket line, economic opportunity, better wages, better benefits, a retirement plan that wouldn't force her to go back to work. And now I look at her every morning at 10 a.m. as she goes back to work because she cannot afford the dysfunction that's happening down in Washington, D.C. And that is what this election is about, is ensuring that we can tackle the challenges here in the city of Philadelphia, and that is what I would go to Washington, D.C. to do. Thank you so much.
All right, so we're going to get into our questions. And some of these questions are from the Crosstown Coalition members. Some of them are from me. So they're going to be a mix of questions. I'll let you know where they're coming from. Again, you'll each have 90 seconds, and the questions will start with the person to the left of the person who got the last question, basically. We'll get it down, I'm sure, after a few rounds. So the first question is from Crosstown Coalition members. If the Democrats win control of the House, what are the top 3 priorities you think that they should work on?
So the top 3, 90 seconds?
Yes.
The top 3 priorities are healthcare, affordability, and education. I say that because in this country, wealth is linked to home ownership. Home ownership is linked to education. Education is linked to health outcomes. And health outcomes are all exacerbated by racial injustice. So when you talk about one, you talk about all. It means for affordability, our minimum wage needs to be higher. It means that our state reps and state senators working with our governor can work towards that. They have a better opportunity to do it at the state level than getting 50 states to change it from 725 to 15 to 17. At the health center I built at 21st and Lehigh, everyone makes $25 an hour or more. When I talk about universal health care, I built that at 21st and Lehigh, and we have a second location on State Road. It was triumph over tragedy from all the folks who were turned away during COVID that when the CARES Act was passed and I generated revenue, I reinvested in the community in North Philadelphia with the lowest life expectancy, so I can bring that to scale when I get to Congress and show that it can be done. Education, affordability, and improved health care. Those are my three.
I also think healthcare and tackling the affordability crisis are two major priorities. I would add to the top that there's got to be some accountability for what is happening right now in Washington. When the Democrats take control next year, we will still have 47 as our president, and there's been no accountability for all the actions that he has put in motion for the executive branch. So I look forward to spearheading some of that accountability. I'm going to probably have a chance to talk more about healthcare, but let me tell you why it is such a priority for me. Because our healthcare system is not just terrible for our health, it is terrible for our economy. Right now, 1 out of every $5 of GDP goes to healthcare. 1 out of every 5. If we continue on the path that we are on, all of us are going to be pretty soon on high deductible plans and one illness away from needing to set up a GoFundMe page. But it is not just that it's the right thing to do to push for expanded government-sponsored insurance, like a Medicare for All, but I can tell you it is a political winner for Democrats. And if Democrats are serious about leading with an economic populist message, then they will make Medicare for All the centerpiece of their strategy.
So there are any number of issues that we have to address. Thank you. Any number of issues we need to address. But assuming Democrats are the majority and we have a Republican Senate, we need to first hold folks to account. Congress can do that. We need to make sure all these lawless thugs are held to account. Too often, Democrats have given these folks a pass. It's unacceptable. But here's the thing. It's not what I care about, but what you care about. And the bottom line is whatever issue is most important to you, whether it's universal health care or guaranteed housing or an increased minimum wage, none of those things will be addressed meaningfully if we don't address two things that are fundamental to everything. One is electoral reform and voting rights. We are seeing the sabotage of our democracy at play here. So we have to address that. And the second one is something that rarely comes up, and it's a little nerdy, but highly relevant here. We need to have media justice. We need to make sure that we don't have 5 tech bros controlling everything we consume. We need to make sure that we have a diversity of thought and expression in our media landscape so that the narratives that Elon Musk wants us to hear are what's going to be dominant in this public space. So there's legislation and action that we can take to make those things happen.
The 3rd Congressional District is in the 2nd largest poorest city in the entire country. So as soon as we get down to Washington, D.C. and take that majority, we have the first 100 days where we have to take action. And first and foremost, the number one priority that we must have going down there is we gotta pull up articles of impeachment for Donald Trump. And not just impeaching him, but his entire administration, and we actually have to prosecute them and hold them accountable for stealing $137 billion from the American people because of their unauthorized tariffs, or him going into other countries unauthorized, again, by Congress. God forbid if Congress can actually take their power back. That actually has to be mission number one. And second, we have to ensure that we are tackling both the affordability crisis and third, the job creation crisis. Because again, when you're in the 2nd largest, biggest city, when it comes to our poverty rate, we have to tackle those things head on. So that means tackling gas prices, healthcare, mass transit, grocery prices. Needless to say, we got a lot to do within the first 100 days.
But then we also got to think about job creation. How are we putting people to work without saddling them in student loan debt? I mean, when I think of the partnership that I created with Google and Community College, it's putting our young people on a pathway to get into IT and AI without being saddled with debt and coming out making $75,000 a year. We have to become a city that's more than eds, meds, and beds, and those have to be our priorities when we go down to Congress.
All right, this time I'm away from the thing. Oh, yes, it started. Top 3 priorities. First thing I would say, look, I live in North Philadelphia. People get shot every day. We need to do something about gun violence. But I'm proud that the mayor and the district attorney have done a good job, and the gun violence deaths are down. But on my desk sits a picture of my oldest daughter. And the young man in the picture went away to college. He went away to college to study to be a doctor. My daughter wanted to be a lawyer. He's dead. And we lost a relative to gun violence on July 4th, 2021, and the federal government needs to restore the assault weapons ban. We should not have weapons of war on our streets. Every day we hear about more people being killed. Other things, we need to deal with affordability. We need to make sure that folks can afford to live in the house that they want to stay in, and people can stay in the houses they are. I helped create the Whole Home Repair Program. It's a co-sponsor on the Center Saval, so that we can put money into letting people stay in the houses that they have. And listen, we need to make sure we restore those Obamacare tax credits to make sure people can have affordable health care as well. And finally, we need to restore the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, because racial, transphobic, homophobic, anti-Semitism, racism, and bigotry is alive and flourishing, and we need to have a federal government that fights against it.
Okay, the next 2 questions are from me. A new NBC News survey just out found 59% of registered voters saying economic and political systems are stacked against people like them. Do you agree with that statement? And if so, what specifically would you do about it as a member of Congress?
I wholeheartedly agree with that statement, and I am wondering, as a Democrat, how the phrase "the system is rigged" became the other team's message, because that should be our message. You know, on November 6, 2024, we woke up to the calamity that was a Democratic defeat here in Pennsylvania. And, you know, you could blame Gaza, you could blame Biden, you could blame the inflation, but the fact is, Democrats for a long time have been nibbling around the edges of systems that have stopped working for Americans a long time ago. Whether that is an economy that is geared to wealth instead of work, whether that is a tax code that has been weaponized to put billions of dollars in the hands of a very few, or that's a healthcare system that is more brazenly every day putting profits over patients. And here's the thing, the irony is, when Democrats have the courage to lead by facing these big issues, they won't only have right on their side, but they will also have politics on their side as well. And I believe if Democrats have the guts to do that, we become a party that is as strong and relevant in central Pennsylvania as it is here in Center City, Philadelphia.
Bad politicians are elected by people who don't vote. What does that mean for Philadelphia and registered voters? This is a one-party town, and we're running in the bluest congressional district in the entire nation, and the first time in 35 years that there's an open seat, which means that there will not be an incumbent on the ballot. If you are a registered Democrat and you don't see meaningful change because your own party is not speaking up, not being bold, not reaching people where they are, there's a reason 60% of folks feel that the system is rigged. But that's our responsibility. That's not on Trump. That's on Democrats. And so if you're not prepared to critique your own party and hold your own leaders to account, then you are complicit. And I have a track record of fighting against establishment Dems because they are complicit in making sure that the folks who are most dispossessed, the folks who are around the edges, the most vulnerable, are not being heard. And unless and until we engage them in good faith, those poll numbers will continue to worsen.
The economy has been stacked against everyday people that you all represent and that are in your communities for decades. And every time we see Republicans take hold of any chamber, you see the wealth gap continuing to widen and widen to the point where the people that we represent just cannot catch up. When you see the majority of the wealth with the top 1% in this country, we know that we are going in the wrong direction, particularly after the big, beautiful bill that has continued to weaponize wealth against everyday people. So if we're not going to have serious conversations about shifting the tax code and, God forbid, going after those dollars that are overseas, that we are not taxing, that they are hiding, that we are not having access to it, we're not going to take serious about taxing capital gains, we're going to continue to be in this position and continue to see our economy work against everyday people like you and I. And not only that, we'll also see, when it comes to our banks that are continuously not lending to communities that look like us, or banks that are overpricing when it comes to lending, when it comes to interest rates, when it comes to building student loans and, going after education opportunities. That is when the economy is stacked against us, and that absolutely has to be a priority for us in Washington, D.C. And when it comes to politics, it makes me think our politics is stacked against us, particularly when you have millionaires and billionaires and corporations and private institutions that are buying up elections. And that is an attempt that is happening here in the 3rd Congressional District that we absolutely have to beat back once we go down to Washington, D.C.
Oh, sure, no problem. And anytime, there's a lot of people that go before some of you, so let me know if you ever want me to do that. A new NBC News survey just out found 59% of registered voters saying the economic and political systems are stacked against people like them. Do you agree with that statement? And if so, what specifically would you do about it as a member of Congress?
Well, yes, I agree with the statement. But I would also say, listen, people aren't engaged because they feel like politicians talk a lot. And a lot of us are really good at it. We give lofty speeches about we got to make it right and we got to have a sense of community. You know what? I live in North Philly. People want us to do something about it. Michelle Obama said, just do something. So yes, and I've been criticizing a lot of specific ideas, but we need to tax capital gains for billionaires as regular income. They pay less than half of what we pay. They pay 15%. Most regular people pay between 28 and 33%. We need to address the fact that they pass on their wealth. They avoided their whole life with stepped up basis, and they never pay any taxes on their corporate holdings. We need to get private equity out of housing and out of healthcare. Hahnemann Hospital closed right down the street from here because private equity bought it up, chopped it up, and then gave it away, and sold all the parts, and then didn't care about the building, and regular people were hurt. We need to make college affordable. We need to make sure that regular people can go to college. We need to make sure regular people can actually get a decent education and not have to mortgage their entire future. And we need to make sure that regular people can buy a house and get a mortgage. And yes, we need to deal with redlining because it keeps regular folks from actually being able to get a mortgage. And guess what? We need to do more than just talk about our values. We did that.
That's time.
We need to actually do something.
I agree with the statement, and that's why I'm running. I am not an establishment candidate. I am not a career politician. I am a public servant. So when I look at this, it's 3 ways. It's legislation, it's leadership, and local. So legislation is, of course, the tax code. With education, it is supporting Title I funding that is not just for college, but associate degrees and also apprenticeship programs. It's home ownership and also rehabilitating homes so people can stay in them, and really disseminating the PHA information that's out there that is income-based, that you can actually own a home, which lots of people are buying up, but there are too many people in our city that aren't familiar. Leadership, because it takes time to legislate and pass the bill. When I get in office, immediately, this RFK ridiculousness about the vaccine recommendations, flipping the nutrition pyramid, taking fluoride out of our water, trying to confirm a surgeon general that doesn't even have a license to practice medicine will be unacceptable, and I will be as loud as he is, and that doesn't take passing a bill. That's leadership. And finally, locally, I will be able to bring funds back. So that's being in touch with the grassroots organizations that are doing the work so I can make sure you can continue to elevate our communities.
Recently, President Trump has been talking a lot about the Save America Act. There are a lot of questions about whether it would get through the Senate. But the idea of voter ID as a concept is popular. A Pew Research Center poll last year found 83% of people supporting requiring a government-issued ID to vote, 71% of Democrats. In Pennsylvania, you have to show an ID the first time you vote at a polling site, at your polling site, but not after that. What kind of change in voter ID requirement would you support, or would you not support any change to existing policies, and why?
We need fewer barriers to vote. We're an industrialized nation that has a very low voter turnout. It is abysmal, and it is going down and down. It used to be much higher in the 70s. We don't need barriers to access to vote. It is absurd when there is so little fraud documented that this is what we're investing in. We're not investing in civic literacy. We're not investing in voter registration. We're not investing in media literacy so people actually know how awful and bigoted voter ID laws are. We're not doing any of that. But we're having a conversation about what kind of documentation should we show for people, the rare small percentage of Americans who actually do their civic duty and show up when it matters most. No, we don't need to be talking about voter ID. It is a voter suppression approach that has been used literally for generations. Because if the playing field were level, the folks who are pushing these things would no longer be in office.
So let's be correct. This bill is not to save America. This bill is to limit America. And limit America's freedoms, limit America's democracy, limit America's ability to access voting. Know that the Save America Act, which hasn't been talked about enough, it will have a negative impact on 67 million women in this country because of the change of your last name, and that we know that women are the backbone of the Democratic Party, which is why he's trying to rig the system. His entire life has been rigged, so that's all he knows how to do. Between telling the big lie of everything, one of the things he only can do is win is by rigging election, and that is what the Save America Act is doing. We don't need more additional ID representation in order to access the ballot box. I mean, he's talking about putting in birth certificates and requiring a passport. Now, I know where my passport is because I'm ready for a vacation, but your birth certificate, I mean, I have to ask my mother where that is. But imagine having to not only access those two documents, but also having to pay for them. So it's not as if he is interested in, again, expanding the voting base, because he knows when that happens, he loses election every time. Which is why he's not just sending ICE and the National Guard into our communities, because for some reason he wants us to be safer. He's sending them in to steal elections and prepare for 2026 for that to happen. So again, know that the Save America Act is not to save America, it's to rig America.
we don't need voter ID laws. We don't need more of them. Voter ID laws are in the tradition of all the Jim Crow barriers that were put up. They're just like poll taxes. They want to make sure that it's harder and harder for people to vote. It is a solution in search of a problem. What really is going on is they want to reduce the number of people that are voting. And not just anybody. They want to reduce low-income people that are voting in inner cities. A lot of folks in my neighborhood, North Philly, don't have their passport accessible because they don't travel that much internationally. You have to pay a fee to get it. They want to make sure you have documentation, and I guarantee you the enforcement won't be uniform. So no, I do not believe we need to figure out more ways to create barriers for people to vote. No, I don't think we have a problem with people voting who aren't supposed to vote. We have a problem with getting more people to vote and making it easier. We need to be looking at ways to expand access to online voting. We need to be looking at making sure we defend early voting and making sure we expand the opportunities for early voting. We need to be looking at ways we can get more and more people engaged, same-day registration. Those are the kinds of things we need to be doing, not figuring out how we can create additional barriers where it's going to cost people money to vote and it's going to be more difficult for people to cast their votes when there is no demonstrable problem in that regard.
So, of course, I am against it, but let's be prepared in case it happens. So things we could be doing right now. I serve as the medical director at the Riverview Wellness Village, where Mayor Parker has built for those who are unhoused with substance use disorder and mental health challenges in Northeast. Most of these folks have been on the street, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. They don't have an ID. So in real time, we have been able to secure their ID, to get their documents at no cost. And so we need to, as we're having a campaign to get people out to vote, to also say, this is a time to check, where's your ID? These systems already exist in the city of Philadelphia. That won't cost anyone anything. It's about disseminating the information, because these folks who were previously living on the street, we're able to get that to them in weeks. The other is, of course, folks that want to get out and do their early voting, make sure that information is available so they know how they can do it. And finally, we get our loved ones to church with carpooling, with vans and all sorts of things. We need to make sure they have rides that are accessible, and people come out to vote and do things when they have trust and they believe that it's going to change things. People know my name from service because you gave me an opportunity to earn your trust, and together we saved lives.
This is gonna get really boring. I wish I could interject some controversy into this answer, but look, does anyone really think that Donald Trump cares about election integrity? I mean, right? This is, as Senator Street said, this is a solution in search of a problem, right? I suppose if we did have a big problem with voter fraud, then maybe that would be a good solution, but we don't have a problem, right? So let me take the conversation somewhere else, right? Maybe charity begins at home, so let's talk about local elections. So what can we do right here to increase voter turnout and change the way that we elect officials? Well, I always wonder, how come we don't have ranked choice voting here in Philadelphia, right? Because ranked choice voting would fundamentally change the way that the Philadelphia kingmakers operate and control who gets into elected office here in Philadelphia. So, it's not just about election integrity, it's not just about who gets to vote, it's about how our electoral systems give us the same old year after year. And that's something we need to address right here in Philadelphia.
These next questions are from the Crosstown Coalition. What do you see as the role of the federal government in growing and maintaining the supply of housing, including affordable housing, particularly in your district? What federal programs do you see as critical in increasing the housing supply?
So right now, you have a mayor that just announced her budget address of $7 billion. And in her proposal this year and last year, she is investing in expanding affordable housing. So that's building, preserving, and repairing. Because like you know, in the different neighborhoods that you all represent, some of us are landlocked. So when I think of D. Dukes over in Winfield, I don't know where we building new houses. But we have a lot of old housing stock where a lot of the houses, particularly in Germantown and Winfield, have been built before 1940. And so we don't necessarily need new housing, but we need housing preservation dollars. And when you look at the state and local budgets, they're extremely limited. They're robbing Peter to pay Paul just to do the bare minimum. But we know we have a significant backlog and a shortage of affordable housing. So that's where the federal government actually comes in. So when you have a mayor that is investing $850 million, when you have a governor that's investing $1 billion, we know that still is not enough, because that's only going to cover 30 to 50,000 units when you connect the city resources, state resources, and PHA, which again means that we have to invest from the federal government. When we talk about infrastructure, we tend to just only talk about rural America, roads and bridges. Well, our infrastructure here in urban centers is affordable housing, so we need to have a plan that is matched with billions of dollars to address that shortfall. But not everybody wants to be a homeowner, so we also have to address the rental prices that we have here in the city of Philadelphia, and that means drafting and moving policies to address them as well.
Thank you. Look, I think the federal government can play a critical role in affordable housing. I was an affordable housing lawyer for almost 2 decades before I got elected to office. And the federal government, under a lot of administrations, Republicans and Democrats at one point, used to invest in affordable housing. That hasn't happened under this administration, and it needs to happen. And we need a massive level of investment we haven't seen in decades. So the federal government should be expanding the low-income housing tax credit program so we can build more housing there. Those could be both home ownership and rental units. The federal government we should restore HUD funding so that we can have more PHA, both home ownership and rental units. We need to enforce the Community Reinvestment Act, because so much of people accessing housing is being able to get an affordable mortgage, and banks don't necessarily lend in every community, and so a lot of regular folks, particularly in Black and brown communities, don't have access. And if you're white, you live in those communities, guess what? Tough, because you're inside the red line and you get hit too. We need to make sure that we restore the Justice Department going after the discrimination that happens where women are turned down for mortgages even though they have the right credit score and they have the right jobs, where people of color are turned down and because people are denied even before they walk in because of surnames. We need that the federal government should both be making the necessary investments, and the federal government should also be doing the enforcement to make sure the private sector resources are there as well.
So the role of the federal government in housing supply, there are 2 current bills on the floor, one co-sponsored by Congressman Dwight Evans, who did endorse me for his seat for Congress. One is the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act, which is for rental and reducing rent. That's important to me because, as I mentioned, we lived in Section 8 housing, and so when we couldn't afford the rent, sometimes it meant we had to pack up quickly and get to the next place my mom could find before the landlord found out that we hadn't paid the rent at the previous location. So that's real to me in terms of having stability in a place to lay your head. The other bill that's currently out is the Neighborhoods Home Investment Act, which is specifically to help people become first-time homeowners, to lower interest rates. And I mentioned previously, I met with Kelvin Jeremiah, and I walked up and down and saw all of the beautiful homes that are being constructed. And what's happening there are families who understand the system. The mom's buying a house, the dad's buying a house, and the children are all buying houses because it's income driven, and they're able to show a low income and get into these homes. But many people in our communities across the district are unaware. So disseminating that information locally, so for what does exist right here, will also be part of what I'll do working with the community.
let me take the opportunity to just pull back the camera a little bit, because the housing crisis is part and parcel of a bigger crisis that really is about the financialization of so many aspects of American life these days, right? We have that going on in healthcare, we have that going on in education. God, my God, private equity is even buying up daycares, and it's going on with housing. And what we see here are just increasing monopolies that literally are creating scarcities, because that's part of their business model, right? So the housing crisis is, look, it's not rocket science. We need to build more houses, and we need to help people who can't afford to get into them. But, beyond the housing crisis, beyond addressing that side, we also have to take some blame of ourselves as Democrats, right? So many things, you look at the barriers to building houses, the bluer the district, the harder it is to build affordable housing, right? That we may not want to admit that, but that's true, right? Somehow, some of the things that we fought for, whether they were environmental protections or protections to maintain, single-family home, are actually now part of the housing crisis. So I think when it comes to housing, it's not simply about one side or the other. It's the excesses of private equity, but we also have to look to ourselves as well for the crisis.
So, irrespective of what we say up here, what our ideas are, where we stand on things, you're going to tell a lot about what the candidate does when they're in office based on who funds their campaigns. So if you hear folks talking about private equity or development and such, follow the money. But it also has an impact on what folks don't say. Something radical like social housing and making sure that everyone has guaranteed housing, that everyone has a home. Now that seems radical because it's so far away from what we experience in this country. But every bomb we drop on Tehran with our money, every bomb, is billions of dollars that could be invested in our communities. We always have the money for war, don't we, folks? Always. And yet we don't have the money for what should be a human right, which is housing. And not just raggedy housing, but good housing. Why? We have the skills, we have the green construction, we have all the things we need except the political will. And you cannot expect someone to do this and make this happen and be a good advocate for it if they're compromised before they even get into office.
Another question from Crosstown Coalition. What do you see as the vision for Fairmount Park? What specific things do you think would be able to be accomplished for the park that others would not, should you be elected?
Great. Look, I think Fairmount Park is one of our great treasures. We have the largest urban park in America, and we need to make sure that we're maintaining it. I was a sponsor of the Urban Ag Bill and the Urban Ag provisions of the Pennsylvania Farm Bill, which allows folks, regular folks, to go out in their communities, maintain community gardens, but also to start little farms. There's a really nice one over in Strawberry Mansion, right on the edges of the park, and where people are growing all kinds of vegetables. And in that space, they're building community, and some people are taking home vegetables that are actually feeding their family. Some children are learning a different sense of nature and are getting connected to it. I think we have to be creative about how we use the park. I'm not a daredevil, but April and the boys went out, and boys did grown, but anyway, they went out into the thing where you sort of were walking through the trees and the high water thing, and they did the zip lining and those kinds of things. Those are recreational activities. We get our kids from behind a computer screen, and we can actually get them engaged, and you can have, daring grandmas like April who are walking out there, and pop-ups like me who are just holding the camera so we can always remember, because I went up on the zip line. But we need to be able to do that. I think it can be a space that if we make the right investments, we can help build community, and we can do so much of it. And it can be a way for our community to be engaged. Thank you so much.
This is an awesome question. Okay, so I am a boy mom. And we have been doing club sports and all sorts of things. My oldest just turned 18, my twins just turned 16. But if I could tell you how much money I spent leaving Philadelphia to go to track meets, to go to swim meets, and club sports. So in New York, they have this Ocean Breeze Park that's run by Parks and Rec. It's an indoor track facility, magnificent. In Maryland, Michael Phelps gave money. They have gymnastics, they have a swimming pool, they have an indoor track. We think about what we want to do with our youth, and so many of them don't have summer jobs, and they have all this idle time that has them get into trouble doing things they shouldn't be doing. That park is huge. Could you imagine if we put an indoor track with a swimming pool, how much money we could bring into the city while also creating jobs in construction, creating jobs for the students, giving them something to do for education. There are more kids in this city that run track. Know why? Because all you need is a pair of sneakers. You don't need any equipment. That's why the Penn Relays is so great and why we're all excited. I was that kid, but what if you could keep all the club sports here and we didn't have to take all that money outside of the city? That's what I would do with it.
Can I be honest for a second? I've been thinking about a lot of things over the last 14 months. I'll admit, Fairmount Park was not one of them. That's not a knock to the question, but what I would like to know more about is what the person who asked that question, what are some of the priorities that they have? Because I'm not able to give you an answer based without knowing a little bit more about what the question is. I might be breaking form, so I'll just rather listen to the rest of my colleagues up there.
I served on the board of the Friends of the Wissahickon. I'm also on the board of the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators that look at ways in which we can bring people out for outdoor activity because it helps with us mentally, physically, particularly young people in urban communities. I love Fairmount Park. Much of it is in my legislative district in Mount Airy and Chestnut Hill, and it is a refuge. It is something people come to from literally New Jersey, New York, Delaware, Maryland to bathe in the wilderness. It is a gym that we must support, and there's so many things we can do. I love your idea. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to compliment an opponent. Is that all right?
Totally fine.
Okay, good. Well, I did it. It's a great idea. But here's the other thing. When we're outside and we have this fresh air and so forth, we forget that this is a very polluted city. That we are victims of environmental racism, and that the neighborhoods around a lot of Fairmount Park are black working class and poor neighborhoods that have suffered industrial pollution and disinvestment for generations. It is literally the reason I ran for office, because that was what my grandmother was fighting against. But if you're taking money from the very people who benefit from that, that's a problem. I keep coming back to follow the money, folks. We have to make sure that our environment is protected so that these green spaces and third spaces are truly the gems they should be for everyone.
Growing up, it always was important for me to distinguish between our recreation space, which we need absolutely a significant amount of investment in, but also our green spaces. And when I think of Fairmount Park, I just think about massive green spaces that has just become a safe havens for so many communities, particularly the communities that you represent. My fondest memory of Fairmount Park is also one of my memories that gives me one of the roughest flashbacks. It is at the Belmont Plateau. Every single year as a high school student, I would run the Belmont Plateau as a cross-country runner and go up that humongous hill that is in the backwoods. I see a couple of heads shaking, so you all know the pain that I was going through. But that recreational opportunity allowed me to gain a Division I track and field scholarship at the University of Virginia. So it's not just about our Fairmont Park spaces being access for communities, but they are literally lifelines for the next generations that are coming behind us, which means we have to adamantly invest in them, and we have to keep them as green spaces. So that means investing in our trails. And I know the federal government can do a significant job in investing in this type of infrastructure for us. So again, that's investing in our trails, investing in our open green spaces, but also investing in our creeks. One of the projects that I worked on was daylighting a creek in Morris Park that actually had an environmental impact all the way down to Cobb's Creek. But it was the federal government that came in and cleaned it up. So those are the type of projects that we need to take on to preserve our Fairmont Park system.
The next questions are from me. Lawmakers have been at an impasse to get the Department of DHS funded, which includes ICE funding. What do you think a funding agreement should look like? And if you were there right now, what would you suggest to get a deal? I recognize those may be two different things.
You know, all of us saw what happened to those people in Minneapolis. And, you know, if that is not something worth going to the mat to fight against, I really don't know what it is. You know, I like to joke that if you need to go to work wearing a mask to hide your identity, you need to ask some questions about your job description. And right now, what we're seeing with ICE has nothing to do with immigration. It has everything to do with getting us used to people coming into our homes without a judicial warrant, or grabbing us off the streets without due process. What's under attack here is not just the lives of immigrants, it's the lives of Americans. And if we don't stand up to this, we risk losing so much more than just the safety of our immigrant neighbors. We risk losing it all. So I don't like the idea of a government shutdown any more than anybody else. But my God, if this is not an issue worth going to the mat on, I really don't know what is.
In 1850, Mansfield, Ohio, Hiram and Julia Wheeler, who had a business and a community that they loved, and 10 kids had to flee for Canada because they were black, because of the passage of the 1850 Fugitive Slave Law. Those were my great-great-great-grandparents. They were proud Americans. They did nothing wrong, but their government betrayed them. And their family could have been split apart, which is the business model of ICE. I was talking about this before it was popular. I introduced legislation, anti-ICE legislation, in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives in 2017. It went nowhere. Granted, it was a Republican-controlled body, but I had very few Democrats stand up beside me in support of this. I'm glad people are coming on board now. Our fates are intertwined. We must resist the terror by the hands of our own government. We must dismantle these detention centers because they are concentration camps and they should have never existed to begin with. We are complicit if we do not speak up. We must demand meaningful change, and that starts with abolishing ICE.
From my perspective, there is no DHS deal or DHS funding until we abolish ICE, until we not just remove Christine Home, because that is Republicans admitting that what is happening is wrong and that they are terrorizing American people, but she also must be prosecuted. And in addition, the ICE agents that are on the ground committing crimes, the government is actively committing crimes on its own American people. They're not just snatching people up in broad daylight, they're snatching 5-year-olds. They're killing people in broad daylight, and until they are held accountable, there is no deal. There is no funding. And this is the moment when we have to hold Republicans accountable for their actions and Democrats accountable for their status quo, like i.e. John Fetterman, 2028, here we come. But again, we have to hit the restart button. There is no deal, and if Democrats don't stand up in this moment, they have to stop asking the question, why aren't people showing up to the polls? Why aren't people believing in their own party when you don't stand up, when you have an opportunity to do so? So that is what we must do right now. But also we have to close these detention centers because they're not talking about how many people they're killing in the cloak of darkness in those detention centers, and we're getting ready to get 3 more in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So they must be shut down as well, and not allowing the oversight committee to investigate them is also a crime.
All right, look, we need to apologize. And we should not fund the Department of Homeland Security if that means we're funding ICE. ICE, they kill people in broad daylight. And look, in my neighborhood, people were shocked when they got to the point where they were just killing middle-class white people in broad daylight because it's been happening to black folks for a long time, but now they're killing everybody in broad daylight. We should not be funding ICE. And I will tell you, for me, it is reminiscent of the days when I was a kid, and my uncle and my father were standing up against the violence that was happening with police violence in Philadelphia, when Frank Rizzo was recruiting known racists into the Philadelphia Police Department, like Trump, and recruited neo-Nazis into ICE. When we traveled through South Philadelphia, campaigning against the charter change because he didn't want to leave. My uncle hanging out in the window of an old rusty truck, my dad driving it, we were in the back. And they threw rocks at us. And I asked my uncle, Uncle Milt, what should we do? He said, duck, pick them up, and throw them back. we gotta be prepared to duck from the oncoming, but we gotta pick up the rocks and throw them back. I have been fighting these kind of folks my whole life. I've sued Donald Trump and beat him over a dozen times. We cannot cave in on this. This is good old-fashioned racism now at the federal level, and we have to stand up against it.
I think some folks may have forgotten, when I was a regional director in U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, there was a big push from Texas and Florida. You guys might remember, and they were sending busloads of people who were undocumented to New York, into DC, into Philadelphia. Y'all remember that? Left them in front of Vice President Harris's home and all these sorts of things. And so now it's like, oh, all these people came in and they're here, what are we supposed to do? It's almost as if they planned it so there would be an excess of undocumented folks that did not have a place to be or whichever. But coming here, it's supposed to be a sanctuary. People are leaving someplace that was unhealthy, not safe, and no opportunities. And our country was built on immigrants coming here. We can protect our borders without killing people. And so what that looks like is we can't fund DHS. However, I don't know if anyone has flown recently or watched the news. Have you seen they've closed, the Seagate at the Philadelphia airport? Like, it's already happening. So what's gonna happen? People are gonna be like, this is an inconvenience to my life, and they're gonna want it to be passed, and we're gonna be right back here. So our judicial branch needs to stand up and start looking at the unconstitutional ways that Trump and Noam, she's still on the payroll. She may not have that position, but she is still getting paid. And so we cannot back down.
You went out of order. There was a mistake made, so.
We're all okay with it. Now that the U.S. is in the war with Iran, what do you see, what do you think the end game should be, and what would you trust as a guarantee that Iran would not be able to possess a nuclear weapon?
What would I trust? So I don't know what we can trust from Iran, and honestly, I don't know what we can trust from the President of the United States. He stated the reason why, and wait, let me back up, there were a couple different stories, stated the reason why was because Iran had weapons, nuclear weapons, that at any time could be deployed on the United States. That was the reason behind it. Then someone else said it was because, I think Rubio, that we needed to change the regime of power and rule, and that's what was necessary for something to happen. Of course, I want to feel safe in my home, in the United States, for my family and my children to be safe. But honestly, the intelligence that we have coming out, it's not transparent. I recognize some things can't be all in the open, but that's the reason you have due process. That's the reason you go through Congress to get approval, that people look at what are the risks and the benefits, if the return on investment is worth what we're doing, and who you're putting in harm's way. I feel like now we've got Venezuela, we've got other countries that are all maybe secretly trying to figure out how to come after the United States for all these unsanctioned actions that are happening. So in short, it's unconstitutional, it's not just, we need the judicial branch to stand up, because right now the legislative branch is inert.
The question is what I mean,
What do you think the end game should, now that
Well,
the
I mean,
US is in
Who the hell
this,
knows
what do
what
you
the
think the
end game
should
is?
be,
We
and
don't
what would you
even know.
trust?
We don't even know what the mission is, right? I mean, this is what happens when a pathological liar is the commander-in-chief, right? Let's just separate out the long-term geopolitical consequences of this war, because really none of us know, right? And we can all agree that Iran possessing a nuclear weapon represents a threat. But let's just put all that aside, and let's just talk about the idea of one person taking this country into war. That is a dangerous idea, particularly when that man is Donald J. Trump, a man who is so impulsive, so idiotic, and so dangerous. You know, when you take a country into war, it's not about justifying the loss of American life. It's about justifying the horrible loss of civilian life. Those bombs that were dropped on that school, those were American bombs that we paid for. I didn't hear anyone make the case why those lives are an acceptable loss, right? So, you know, as far as the geopolitical consequences, I don't know, like the rest of us. But I know the consequences of letting a man like Donald J. Trump take us to war.
I don't normally say this, but I think you're giving Donald Trump too much credit, because it's not Donald Trump's war, it's Netanyahu's war. It's Netanyahu's war. And you know who pays for that? Israelis. Do you think Israeli citizens feel safer because of what Donald Trump did at Netanyahu's bidding? Of course not. I have friends whose family members are sheltered in bunkers. This is not a game. And we're spending our taxpayer dollars bombing schoolgirls. And who benefits from it? Who are the folks, who are the war hawks who want this, who want to destabilize Iran? It doesn't matter how awful we think their regime is. I think our regime is awful. I don't want any nation coming into here and bombing us. There should be one standard. And so what I believe is that we need to make sure that we need to connect the dots. We need to connect the dots and see who benefits from this war game. And frankly, the organizations who are paying candidates or who are funding candidates directly or indirectly include AIPAC. AIPAC wants a war in Iran. All of our fates are intertwined. We have to make sure that we hold our candidates to account in terms of who's funding our campaigns and what we ultimately do when we're in Congress to make sure we have no more endless wars.
We all can remember where we were when 9/11 happened. I was in English class, I was in 12th grade, and we were waking up to an America that was beginning to be in an endless war. And we were told one reason as to why we were there, and completely different reasons as to why we left. This is a repeat of what we are seeing again when Republicans take office, and be reminded that elections have consequences. And this is the consequence of our bad election season here in 2024 here in Pennsylvania. We have a guy that is in office that is committing, again, crimes because he is circumventing Congress. And the Republicans that are allowing him to do this are right on board with us going to war that is costing us $1 billion a day. That is $1 billion a day that not only is putting American lives in jeopardy, but it's putting more money in the pockets of defense spending, when we have other priorities in this country. And again, he tells us one thing one day, that it is for nuclear weapons, but just a couple of weeks back, I thought he talked about him destroying all of their nuclear weapons and their capabilities. So it again goes into a round robin way when it comes to, what role we're playing in that region and how we even get out of this. So again, elections have consequences, and this is as a direct result, and we have to take back that Congress to go in a different direction.
Donald Trump lies. Donald Trump lies a lot. In the first term, it was estimated by, I think, CNN that he lied 5,000 times. 5,000 times is a lot of lies. So, he said we destroyed all of Iran's nuclear capacity. And then he said we had to go into war with Iran to stop nuclear weapons. Sure, he says that because none of us really want Iran to have nuclear weapons. But was it really about that? He went to war in Venezuela and he was blowing up fishing boats because he says it was about drugs. And then he says, well, no, it's about regime change. We got to free the people of Venezuela. But no, the vice president is cool with my company getting the oil. I think the same old regime can stay. Now he says he wants regime change in Iran, but he says if the guy's son agrees to let him have access to what he wants, then they can stay too. He wanted Greenland. Remember that? And then he wanted, and now he's talking about Cuba. Congress needs to pass a more restrictive War Powers Act. No president, but especially not this reckless, irresponsible president, should be allowed to take us to war. We will never know why, because every time he opens his mouth, it's full of lies.
Everyone went, right? Okay. All right, we're going to move to our lightning round. I hear some grumbling. All right, so you have panels. This will actually go pretty quickly. Let's give it a try. Yeses in the green, no's in the reds. Halfway from the half rail, however you want to do it. All up to you. Are we good? Everyone good? All right. Should members of Congress be paid during a government shutdown? Should members of Congress be paid during a government shutdown? Okay. Do you ride SEPTA regularly?
Ever or
Regularly. Should members of Congress be prohibited from trading stocks while in office? This is a little wonky. This is a little wonky. I'm going to ask you about something called a discharge petition, which is basically a way to force a bill to go to the floor when the leadership doesn't want to put it on the calendar or bring it up. We have seen this happen recently quite a bit in this Congress, including with the Epstein trials. If Democrats control the House, would you be willing to use a discharge petition to get something to the floor that you believed in over the objection of Democratic leadership? Recently, when President Trump delivered his State of the Union address, some Democrats chose not to attend. You would be in office for his next State of the Union if elected. Would you attend President Trump's next State of the Union address? The answer can be, I don't know. That's fine. Have you set any personal guidelines of money that you will not accept in your campaign? All right. You will each get 60 seconds for your closing statements. And Representative Brown, I believe you are first.
Thank you. I do not take corporate PAC money. I have never taken corporate PAC money. I am accountable to the people. I represent the many, not the moneyed. That matters more than ever because there's never been a larger infusion of corporate interests than now. It is important to know who's funding the campaigns of the candidates you will be voting on because the next person who takes this office is going to be there potentially for a generation. And coming out of this district, the bluest congressional district in the entire nation, what kind of public servant do you want? Do you want a status quo politician? Or do you want someone who believes in transformational change? When it matters most. That's what I want you to think about when you think about May 19th. Thank you.
We are in the second poorest, biggest city in the entire country. The fundamental question that we have to ask on May 19th is what type of Democrat do we want to send to Congress? As my colleague said, it's the most Democratic seat in the entire country. Believe it or not, more Democratic than in California, but it's also the youngest. So when we think of the challenges that are ahead of us here for Philadelphia, when we think of healthcare, groceries, economics, job opportunities, again, I think about my mother who in 1986 had to fight the same fights that we are fighting today. And the question is, what do we want Philadelphia to be, not just in 2026, but in 2036? And I've spent the last 10 years of my life in Harrisburg making sure that we have been transformative. We didn't have the House of Representatives for 10 to 15 years. We were able to take it back in 5 and actually be transformative here in the city of Philadelphia. People are going to talk to you about big ideas. They're going to talk to you about what they've done, but who has actually gotten results? And in this moment, we need to ensure that we bring results to Harrisburg as well as Washington, D.C. and the city of Philadelphia.
Listen, Barack Obama called it the fierce urgency of now. People need someone to get things done. A lot of folks on this stage, our values may be similar on a lot of issues. Housing. We want to talk about keeping people in their homes. I was a co-sponsor along with Senator Saval of the whole home repair program, and we put money in folks' houses to allow them to be able to stay where they are. I delivered money for affordable housing at Shars Woodworth. Hundreds of new units of housing are done. The Pennsylvania Healthcare Exchange, I introduced the legislation and got it through a Republican-controlled House and Senate at that time, got it to the governor's desk, and 500,000 additional people have health care. Delivered $300 million a year for affordable housing. When it started at violence going out at an all-time high, now it's at an all-time low. I've shown the ability to get things done as a state senator. I will get things done as a member of Congress. People need us to get things done now.
We measure leadership by how it impacts you and how it touches your lives and the lives of people you love. I am a private citizen. I am an outsider in this race, and you all know my name from serving other people. It was not my job. I was not elected to do it, but I knew I had something within my mind that we could get something done, a vision and a path to save lives. And we did it together, Philadelphia. I might have had the vision, but it was collectively we were able to save lives. That then allowed President Biden to appoint me and bring that grassroots leadership to Washington, D.C. I won't have to start off new, because I still know many of the folks on the Hill. I continue to consult with them to bring the best, and I'm the only one who went from Section 8 to SNAP to serving the city, overcoming, giving back to the White House, and ready to go back and serve you more. Thank you.
So let me not talk about myself and my own electoral ambitions, but let me talk about what I wish for the Democratic Party. You know, we talked a lot about Trump here tonight, but we're here really to talk about the future of the Democratic Party. Because the fight against Trumpism is not going to end with Donald Trump. And unless our plan is to go into the woods with AK-47s and start fighting this guerrilla war, you know what we need to do, Democrats? We need to start winning elections, and we need to start winning them big. And the path forward is so clear. We need to do two things. One, stop leading timidly and lead with big ideas. And number two, we need to stop just calling people out, and we need to start calling people in, right? We cannot push people away whose only flaw is they don't agree with us on 100% of the stuff. And I believe if we do that, we build a party, like I said, that is as popular in central Pennsylvania as it is here in Center City, Philadelphia, and that's the only kind of party that's going to get us out of the mess we are in now.
All right, that wraps up our questions for the evening. Drew, I don't know if you have anything else, but I want to thank all of you for your time and your answers tonight.